Welcome to Truth or Raps. Let's see if we can finish up the Believe analysis. It's probably going to go a lot faster through whatever's left of it to finish it, because obviously it was sort of going at a laconic speed, but I think it might be good. So, Believe, as I said in the other two analysis videos, Believe is one of Eminem's most motivational songs, and it's really one of his most realistic songs that I've found in terms of talking about the creative process. So, like, for example, one thing I didn't mention was him saying, "Staying wound up is how I spend time." Get it? I think I mentioned it in terms of the silly little pun that Eminem does there, and if there is one thing that you could criticize about Eminem's newer stuff, I'd say newer being everything from Relapse on, maybe, or something like that. It would be his tendency to just make a pun that isn't particularly good, but point to it hard enough that it's like he'll often say, and he says it actually here, he'll often say, like, get it? So he says in the lyrics here from Google, just the Google lyrics results that you don't even have to click on a website to get to, it says, "Staying wound up is how I spend time. Get it? Get it," in parentheses with a question mark and no capitals. You know, it's like Eminem, yeah, he does often have, fairly often in his latter career, he will have like a pun that you didn't really pick up until even years later, and it's like, oh shit, that was a pun. But it's that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good pun. Like, there's the difference. I had a poetry class in college, and I think I did a pretty bad job on it, actually, but the professor gave me perhaps one of the most interesting essays. Like, she gave everyone an essay to, like, explain to the class, but then everyone else had to read it, if you were actually doing the assignment and stuff. And she gave me an essay about open metaphors, and it really spoke to me. So open metaphors are metaphors where there's a lot of ground that you could cover in terms of what they mean. So an open metaphor would be something like Aesop Rock's line that I've mentioned many times. My introverted side is flying cadavers on kite strings. You could think about that in so many different ways. It's a very open metaphor. There's a lot there to unpack. There's a lot there to think about and relate to other stuff that Aesop Rock said, and then also relate to the persona created, perhaps in part by the other stuff that he said and stuff like that. And it's like, well, what does this mean about Aesop Rock? That is different, and I think I use this example. That's different from like a closed metaphor. So that's an open metaphor. Open metaphor, very powerful. There's just a lot to extrapolate. There's a lot of open space within the interpretation of it. And then a closed metaphor is often something more like what Eminem does recently. Like Drake, I think I use this line as more of an open metaphor, but it's sort of open and closed. Like, eyes hurting, Drake says, eyes hurting from the camera phone light shows. It's sort of interesting because it's like the camera phone light shows, I often have imagined him on stage with those camera phone light shows, and it's so it's like Drake's on stage putting on a show, but his eyes are hurting from the light show from the crowd because everyone has their camera phones out, maybe, or a lot of people do, and they're snapping pictures of him. And so it's like the show is up here, but really, like, there's just as much of a show down there, and a show, even more of a show perhaps, because it's blinding how much of a show there is, whereas if you were looking up on the stage, maybe it wouldn't be blinding. And even more so than that, Drake is the person they all came to see, and yet Drake is being blinded by these camera phone light shows. So it's like, who's putting on a more powerful show, Drake or his audience? That's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's a little less open. Like, you could talk about it in many ways, but I think it is still less open, less fecund than Aesop Rock's line that I mentioned about flying cadavers on kite strings. Now, the thing about Eminem is that a lot of his shit, like, I refer to it as shit here. I really love Eminem and his newer stuff, and I think his flows are outrageous, but a lot of his shit, like the shittier things, like for example, let's use a line with shit in it. He says, quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. What does that mean? Like, yes, cut the crap, quit playing. Like, cut the crap is a phrase. It's a phrase used to indicate, like, stop talking bullshit, you know. Essentially, it's a phrase used to indicate, like, stop deceiving me. Stop saying something that doesn't, not only isn't really true, but doesn't even have a lot behind it to support, if it were true kind of thing. Like, cut the crap, you know. But Eminem takes the phrase cut the crap, which is already a cliche, and so you're not starting off on the best foot there. Eminem could probably turn a cliche into something good, and he probably has many times if I went and looked through and pointed out stuff, but you're starting with a cliche. It's like cut the crap, you're starting with something that's already removed from the message of it. And then he just adds in like another image that like has very little to do with anything, like quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. Like, oh, playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. Okay, and when you say quit playing with the scissors and shit, that's similar to a construction. That's basically the construction that people also use in society, saying like, oh, quit doing this, quit fucking around and shit, or like quit watching TV and shit, or quit talking about Mad Men and shit. You know, it's like, it's just sort of an extra couple of words there to indicate you're doing, you know, there's more to refer to than just what I've referred to in the statement leading up to it. But it's like, what does it mean in the rhyme? Like, it's like, yes, so he uses this, quit playing with the scissors and shit. So he uses a phrase like, and shit, but he uses it here as a more literal phrase because it's quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. And it's like, okay, like, I see what you're doing. I see how it fits together. But it's like, what does someone playing with the scissors mean? Now, here's the point. Like, what is he referring to by saying quit playing with the scissors? Take out the end shit because, yes, he's like, end shit is doing more than just playing with scissors, but it tends to give like a sense of like someone is not doing very much at all. They're just doing this and shit, you know, it's just like not much else, and even what they're doing is not very important. But so we know what end shit is doing there, and we know what and cut the crap is doing, but what is playing with the scissors doing? Like, what is that ever referring to? Like, that's not a phrase. Quit playing with the scissors. Like, what do you mean? Like, playing with actual scissors? And it's like, okay, well, if that's not a phrase, then what does Eminem mean by saying it? And it's like, I think he literally means nothing. Like, literally, I think he's not really pointing to anything by saying quit playing with the scissors. Like, nobody's actually playing with scissors. I guess you could say, like, don't run with scissors is sort of a phrase, and so you know, don't play around with something that's that could hurt you if you make a wrong move or something. It's like, okay, like that's sort of close to a phrase with the relation to running with scissors as being a phrase. Don't run with scissors, which is an actual piece of advice, literally saying don't run with scissors. But then it sort of became like, you know, what's his name? Some guy had released a book called Running with Scissors, and it became sort of like a cliche beyond just like the advice not to run with actual scissors. But there are no actual scissors here, and there's nothing here. It's quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. That might be the worst line in Eminem's whole career. And so, you know, that I would refer to as more of a closed metaphor. I don't know if you could give me a metaphor that I couldn't open up in some way. As you saw, I might have even opened up that scissors thing a little bit, but it's like, that's close to, that's like a high level of being a closed metaphor. Like, it's a low level of openness, let's say, if we were working for the polarity there, and openness was the function, and then it's a lower level of openness, just like it's less light, it's not more darkness, it's less light, it's lower openness. But Eminem saying, quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap, that's like meaningless. It's like, yes, cut the crap, like basically, and then he goes on to say, I shouldn't have to rhyme these words in a rhythm for y'all to know it's a rap. It's like, I like the sound of that, but even that is like, that's a little more open because it's like, yes, for y'all to know it's a rap, an R-A-P, a rap, what he does, he's a rapper, he raps. This is Truth or Raps talking raps, but it's like, it's like, it's meaningless. It's a fucking meaningless, it's like nobody's playing with scissors. It's like, quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. That's like one of the weakest attempts at like a clever pun I've ever seen. It's like, yeah, it's kind of a pun, but it's a pun building off of nothing because nobody is actually playing with scissors. Like, the root of it is somebody supposedly playing with scissors, and it's like, who's playing with scissors? What does playing with scissors mean? Like, quit playing with the scissors and shit and cut the crap. Stop doing this and do that. It's like, well, if nobody is doing this, then, it. So that's more of a closed metaphor. And you could certainly criticize, as I might, Eminem for using a lot more closed metaphors, or, I think a metaphor can also be a simile. Like, a simile is a metaphor, but a metaphor doesn't have to be a simile. Like, metaphor is I think it's the wider category, or maybe I'm just referring to hip-hop people talking about everything and calling it a metaphor, even if it's a simile or something. It's like, oh, that was a good metaphor. It's like, yeah, it wasn't a metaphor, it was a simile because I used like or as. But anyway, Believe falls into some of that. I think Eminem throws out so many puns these days, and it's, again, similar to that was from the song Not Afraid, the scissors and shit thing, which is full of like a lot of cringers, if you want to. I don't like that term, cringe. It's just like it's not an argument. If Stefan Molyneux were to criticize it, he might say, that's not an argument, but Stefan Molyneux is like enough to say common sort of trendy words anyway that I imagine he says cringe sometimes, although really thinking back, I don't know how often I've ever heard him say that in the more recent stuff I've heard in the time period where cringe was sort of a thing to say. But cringe is not an argument. It's like, oh, that's so cringe. It's like, oh, well, do you have an actual thing to say about it, or are you just gonna say that, essentially say that it made you uncomfortable? It's like, okay, it made you uncomfortable. Now, I'm not part of the no comfort ever cult either, the whole cult of modern society where it's like, hate your comfort zone, stay out of your comfort zone, which sort of translates to me to never relax, never feel at ease, always be uncomfortable. And it's like, well, to just look at the term disease. I'm not a big believer in all the shit they try to pass off as disease, whether it be psychological disease or whether it be you having a sneeze or you having nothing and them trying to maybe pass it off as something else. But the term disease is sort of an evocative term, and I imagine many people have thought about this. Somebody told me this in frickin' health class. Like, it's not like super like Chiron last level or even more than that level, like hidden meanings in the language. Disease, dis-ease. You are not at ease. Something is uncomfortable. Like, there is a level of dysregulation. There is a level of you not being at ease that is synonymous, literally, not even synonymous, but it literally is the word of sickness. Like, sickness is you not being at ease. So why are they fucking trying to tell everyone in society for basically my whole life, really, like, stay out of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is bad. Oh, you're just Macklemore saying, and I like Macklemore. I like a lot of what Macklemore has done, and I think he's actually, it's sort of like a weirdly, like, counter mainstream set of rhymes that he has in his new stuff. Like, it seems like he's going somewhat counter mainstream, which is sort of interesting for the guy who did Same Love. Although I don't know if that necessarily came from a bad place so much as it just came from a generic one. But Macklemore saying, the people who put their passion ahead of them being comfortable, I think he says that in the song 10,000 Hours, and I like that song. Or some song on The Heist, I think. But Macklemore, or maybe This Unruly Mess I've Made or something, maybe even Gemini, but Macklemore, he says, like, people put their passion ahead of being comfortable. It's like, this whole cult of, like, yes, I get the idea of, like, oh, don't just be, like, slovenly or slothful, like, if you want something, then, you go out and do something. I get that idea, but why is there's this, like, fascination in our culture of, like, you must always be uncomfortable. You must face your fears. If you're afraid, I started hearing people say this maybe more in college or something, but people would say, like, I know it's the right thing to do because of how afraid I am of it. And it's like, are you guys fucking like a cult of just feeling bad all the time? Like, and I'm not one of those guys who's going to be like saying, "Oh, you know, you need to like you made me feel bad in some way or another necessarily," or like although even with that, it's like if somebody like tries to make someone else like feel psychological pain, it's like that's an evil thing to do. And then another person might turn around and say, "Oh, well, you know, just let it roll." I mean, yes, let it roll off your back is probably good advice. Just let it go. But this idea of being like, oh, you know, like sticks and stones can break my bones, and like, oh, like if you, this is a little newer actually, but I've seen this more recently anyway. But it's sort of this like semi-spiritual bullshit of like, well, if you're criticizing something, that means that the thing that you're criticizing activated something in you that was already there. So, and there, I think there is a sense of truth to that, but there's also a sense that I see way more often with people talking about that, where you'll make an argument about something under a YouTube video, for example, and then someone will, instead of responding to your argument, responding to your points, they'll say, well, hey man, it seems like you really feel strongly about this, so I think you should look in yourself because clearly there's something there that's being picked at by this, and so maybe this has an actual point, and that's why you're mad at it. And it's like, no, you don't have to have an actual point for someone to get mad at you. Like, if you break someone's window, they might get mad at you. And then if you say to them, like, well, man, you know, like, I broke your window, but, like, clearly there was some anger bubbling inside you. It's like, yeah, there probably was that anger bubbling inside them. And if somebody responds very angrily, it probably is due to them carrying around, like, more stuff or something, like them being more likely to respond in an angry way to something. One thing is, though, that doesn't mean that what they're responding to in an angry way isn't worth responding to. It's like that doesn't mean that somebody breaking someone's window isn't something worth criticizing.